Hello everyone. This is the first video of the video series about database transactions. In this video series, I will try to cover everything you need to know in order to fully understand database transactions. The exams will be provided in the PostgreSQL. Right, let's start with a definition. Database transaction is a set of SQL statements executed as a single unit of work. Let's try to take it step by step. So first part of the definition says that transaction is a set of SQL statements, right? So say we have a set of SQL statements, we have two inserts and one select. Now, in order to convert those into a database transaction, or in other words, in order those SQL statements to participate in the same transaction, first we have to explicitly start a transaction. And the way we do that is by executing a begin transaction. And begin transaction marks the, as you might imagine, beginning of a transaction. So whatever comes after that will be part of a transaction that we just started. What else can we do with a transaction? So far we started transaction, we have three statements, that's part of that, but what else can we do? Well, first thing is that we can commit a transaction, and that's done by executing commit statement. And what it does is that changes that we made in a transaction, meaning changes to a data. In this case, we have a couple of changes, which are both of them are inserts. So we inserted two new rows. Also, it can be that you updated a row or you deleted a row. Any change that you make in a transaction, meaning after the begin statement and before commit statement, any change that you made is now permanently stored into a database. It means that before you execute a commit, those changes really are in a draft state. So think of it like when you're writing an email, right? First you write a draft, right? You come up with an initial sketch, then maybe you use ChatGPT to polish it a little bit, then maybe you spot some grammar mistakes and you make this change as well. But before you click the send button, this email just exists for you. It's only you who can see that email, right? No one else. That's how the uncommitted transaction is really acts like. So once we execute a commit, that really is like clicking a send button to your email, right? So you're saying that I know what I changed here, it looks good, I want to commit it, right? I want to make it part of a permanent storage in a database, meaning that when other transactions or other users query the data, I want them to see my changes, right? So that's what really the commit does. As you can imagine, if we can save those changes, there must be a way we can throw away the changes, right? And you're absolutely right, there is, and that's called a rollback, right? What rollback does is quite the opposite, right? It says that all the changes that I made, it doesn't look good to me, and I want to throw it away. It resembles to, with our email analogy, say you are writing a draft, and at some point you say that, you know what, I no longer want to send this email. It doesn't look good. And then you click this trash icon button, and it deletes your email, right? So that trash icon, in terms of transactions, is a rollback. And it throws away the changes that you made in a transaction. So no one will ever see those changes, right? So those are two things that we can do. And next up, we're gonna discuss all the different types of SQL statements that can participate in a transaction, right? So far we saw that here we have insert statement, right? We have a select statement. And for the select statement, actually one thing that I want to mention is that when you commit it, there's nothing to commit for the select statement, right? It's just reading a data, so there was no change. So when you execute a commit, as far as select statement goes, there is nothing that needs to be done, right? Only thing that needs to be done is the changes that you make in a transaction that was in a draft state up until this point will now be consolidated into a database, or rather be permanently stored into a database, right? So next we're gonna see all the different categories of the SQL statements, and let's move to that, right? So SQL statements are divided into categories, okay? And in this part of the video, we're gonna see what are those categories and if they can participate in a transaction, right? Because not every statement can participate in a transaction. So let's quickly go through this table. The first one is DDL, so data definition language. Those are part of the group of the SQL statements which define the shape of a data, right? Here you define the table, you define the schema, right? You drop a table, this sort of stuff. And yes, you can do it in a transaction. You can create tables, alter tables, and at some point you might say, you know what, this change doesn't look good, I want to roll back it, right? You can do that, or I want to commit it. But there are some exceptions. So, for example, you cannot create a database within a transaction, or drop a database, right? Nor you can alter a database. That you cannot do in a transaction. Next up is a data query language, and that we already saw. Here we have a select statement, and we already saw that it can participate in a transaction. Next up we have data manipulation language. This is the language that we use to change the data, right? You already saw that. We saw a couple of inserts, although you can do an update or a delete, and yes, you can do it in a transaction. Next up is a data control language. This really goes for the administrative tasks, where you can create a users, create a roles, grant a permission to a specific table or specific databases. And those are the statements that you can use for those tasks, right? And yes, you can use that in a transaction as well. And the next up is a transaction control language. This is a part of a group of SQL statements which we use to work with the transactions, right? So we already saw a begin transaction, we already saw a commit and rollback, and those specific ones cannot be used within a transaction, but TCL also includes what's called the save points, right? And save points can be used in a transaction. We're gonna see it in a detail, don't get confused now. We're gonna have a separate video, we're gonna talk about save points. For now, just know that save point is a way to create a sub-transaction. So transactions within a transactions, right? So those you can do in a transaction, but you cannot have begin transaction, commit, and rollback in a transaction. So imagine you execute a begin transaction, right? Then if you execute another begin transaction, nothing really gonna happen. It's not gonna start a child transaction, right? Or if you execute a commit, it's just gonna commit your transaction. So technically speaking, within a transaction, you cannot use those statements, right? If you use it, it's just gonna terminate a transaction, right? And last but not least, just to cover all of them, we have a maintenance statements, which is like a vacuum and reindex, and those cannot participate in a transaction. To wrap this session up, here we discussed what a database transaction is, and specifically the first part of it. We saw all the categories of SQL statements that can participate in a transaction. We saw how we can start a transaction, commit, or a rollback. We did not really talk much about the part where it says a single unit of work. We're gonna go into that in the later videos. First, we're gonna see other properties of a transaction, which slowly gonna lead us to the understanding of what unit of work means, right? So in the next one specifically, we will be discussing transaction IDs. So see you there.